In December 2020, I was a freshman at the University of Arizona, looking forward to the Christmas holidays with my cousins in California. As a family, we have always split Christmas between our house in Arizona and my uncle's in California. This year, my family was to go to my uncle's house to celebrate and have a Christmas week together. Each year, we look for a game to play and alternate which family brings the fun. Last year, at our house, my cousins got Monopoly, and the year before, my family brought the game of life to their place. This year is my family's choice of game. My mom asked me to find something memorable and left that responsibility to me to select the game. I'm a little into goth this year, and I like the darker side of life, so spirits and seances and the general darkness of death intrigue me. I had begun searching for a game at a store that delved into magic and fortune-telling. They had crystal balls, tarot cards, and an Ouija board. $35 made by Hasbro, 8 years and older, recommended. Perfect. My sister was the youngest and she was 8. Of the 5 kids with the 3 cousins, I was the oldest. Even the parents will enjoy a memorable evening playing with the Ouija board. I surfed YouTube for the proper questions and watched a few scary stories about people's experiences with Ouija boards so I could lead the game. On the second night of our visit and 2 days before Christmas, all the kids were ready to play a game. As we have done every year, the game was kept a secret until we were all assembled at the dining room table. I appropriately dimmed the lights, pulled the curtains, and darkened the rest of the house. I lit 2 candles and placed them on the mantle for extra ambiance. Our parents came in, wished us a great game, and left to visit friends. When I presented the game box, everyone blankly looked at the box and then at me and said, "What's the game?" I explained it was an Ouija board, and with this, we could communicate with spirits, maybe even our dead grandfather, who we all adored. I placed the wooden board on the table and showed that it had the alphabet across the center in an arc, and below that, numbers from 1 to 10. In the upper left corner, the word yes, and in the upper right, no. And at the bottom center, the words goodbye. We played the game by asking the board questions. The board answered through each of us as we placed our fingertips on the planchette, a heart-shaped piece of wood with a little glass magnifying glass to reveal the message as it is spelled out during the game. My little sister shrieked, "No, it's too scary. I don't want to play." But my cousins convinced her it would be fun, and she sat back in her chair. We all placed our fingertips on the planchette, and I asked the first question to show them how it was to be done. It still came off awkward and funny, and everyone was laughing. Everyone giggled in silence, but the planchette didn't move. My cousins started to look at me like, okay, when will it tell us something? I started to move the planchette to get it started and try to creep out my cousins, especially my little sister. They caught on quickly and knew it was me. After a few minutes of doing this, we started to get bored, and my little sister wanted to quit and go to her room to watch Disney. Let's try for a few more minutes. I asked a question in a serious voice, and we all sat in silence, waiting. Nothing happened. The planchette remained still, without the slightest movement from an unseen spirit. We decided to give up, and my sister darted up the stairs to her room, happy to play independently. My cousins went into the den to watch a movie. I got my cell phone out, looked up more Ouija board stories online, and kept reading other people's experiences. I researched why it didn't work for us. It was a common experience for many people that nothing happened the first time they played. So when everyone that night was asleep in bed at about 2 in the morning, I snuck down to the dining room. I silently lit the candles on the mantle and placed the Ouija board on the table. In a whispered voice to not wake anyone in the house, I asked the Ouija a question. I held the planchette with both hands, waiting for it to move. But nothing happened. But upstairs, I heard soft footsteps. I figured it was my sister. Maybe she heard me leave the room we were sleeping in together. The footsteps were then followed by a whispered man's voice. Way too old a voice for my sister, and diffidently male. I went on tiptoe up the stairs, and the whisper became louder, but still indistinct. I listened in the hall, and the sound came from my 3 cousins' room. Now I smiled a little and thought they were playing a prank on me. Somehow, they were changing their voice to that of an old man to scare me. I put my ear to the door to listen, and I plainly heard an old man's voice whisper, Grandpa's here. In a flash, I realized it was the voice of my dead grandfather. I opened the door and turned on the light, and my 3 cousins were asleep in the beds and no one else was in the room. The voice had stopped. I shut the door, ran back to my room where my little sister was sleeping, and locked the door. I sat up in bed the rest of the night. The voice of grandfather was too clear to have been imagined. Beware the innermost secret. One summer, 3 elementary school boys found a discarded Ouija board in a trash bin. It was mostly by accident since they weren't often dumpster diving. It just happened they looked in for some odd reason and the board caught their eye. The boys were friends, but it was an awkward relationship. All 3 were socially clumsy with few friends. The oldest of the 3 was named Ed, and he was terribly cruel to the younger 2 boys. He punched the other 2 for no reason and then laughed as if it were a joke. It's so hard it bruised. Then he would call them derogatory names and tell them how stupid they were. Both the younger boys disliked the abuse but said nothing. They tolerated it because they had no other friends, and Ed provided security at school from being bullied by others. Well, they took the Ouija board to Ed's house where they could play the game. The house was almost always empty because Ed's mother had left long ago. Nobody knew where she was, and his father was always working. As the boys sat in the breakfast room with their hands on the planchette, they grew bored with nothing happening and were about to give up. They had been sitting for more than 20 minutes concentrating on the planchette, but just as they looked up to quit, the planchette moved and began spelling out the word G-E-T-O-U-T, get out. Ed shouted, I live here. The planchette again moved quickly, N-O-W, now. I wonder what it means, said the youngest, glancing up at Ed and asking the board, where should we go? The planchette continued moving, I-T-H-U-R-T-S. It hurt. Ed said, this is stupid. You 2 are doing this. You're trying to make me look bad. You 2 let go of the board and ask a question which answers only I will know. The youngest asked immediately, who is the person who keeps hitting me? Ed glared, but the planchette was already moving D-A-D, Dad, the board spelled out. Ed's face flushed red and he began to breathe hard. The board again spelled out Dad. Ed jumped up from the table and ran crying from the room. This was the first time the younger boys had ever seen Ed cry. From their parents that night, they learned that Ed's father was known for abusive behavior and routinely would have beaten Ed. Somehow, the Ouija board knew Ed's innermost secret. I was 13 when this story took place. I'm still in and out of psychiatric care. I come from a typical Christian family in Kentucky. I'm the second to last child in our family of 5 children. I have 3 older sisters and 1 younger brother. I had a good friend from school who didn't live far from me, and we spent a lot of time together. She's a bit occult and believes in the supernatural and things like that. She likes to pretend with seance. She said she really does speak with the dead. Well, I'm from a Christian family, and none of this is acceptable. My dad would whoop me if I did anything like a seance. But I'm 13 and a little rebellious, so when my friend got an Ouija board and begged me to play, I said yes on the condition no one was to know that I did. We planned to sleep over at her house over the weekend and waited until everyone was asleep. Her parents weren't as strict as mine, but I didn't want anyone to know. My dad would disapprove of the capital D if he found out. We played all night. I was utterly enamored and mesmerized by this mysterious talking board. It really did answer our questions. I knew when I was going to marry, and to whom. I knew when my sisters would marry, and if my brother would play varsity his senior year. The talking board knew all the answers. I asked my friend if I could take the board home for the week. I was so obsessed with it. I had so many questions. She gave it to me and I took it home and hid it in my dresser. I had about an hour each day from when I got home from school until my parents were home from work and when my siblings would be home. The older ones all had after-school sports, and my little brother had to wait for my parents to pick him up from after-school program he attended. So, on Monday, I raced home, took the Ouija board out, and placed the planchette on the board and my fingertips on the planchette. But before I could ask a question, planchette moved, saying hi. I said hi back. Who is this? And the board spelled out T-O-M. I was shocked as Tom, my best friend in 7th grade, was killed by a drunk driver with his mom that year. I asked if this was really you, Tom, and the planchette moved to yes. Every day after school, I raced home to communicate with Tom. It was exciting, and I was having the best time. But after the 3rd day, I felt uneasy that this wasn't Tom. His conversation was so dark and foreboding. I didn't like what he said about my family and how they would die. When I questioned whether this was really my friend, it revealed that it was not, but it didn't matter now because he controlled me. He said he would kill anyone that I told of our conversations. When my family got home, they said they found me crying, curled on my bedroom floor, inconsolable. They took me to a psychiatrist, but I still struggled to regain control after the Ouija board.